On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, financial anxiety, recognizing and managing money-related stress. So welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. I think that I've got my sound adjusted from last time, so we're actually recording into the mics now instead of recording into the camera mic. We're recording into the actual mics plugged into the computer. But that's not why my voice sounds all screwed up.
Modulation.
Wow. So my name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, host of the Crushing Debt Podcast. Welcome back, your co-host, your financial coach, George Corbello. Welcome, George.
I'm going to take over here because I feel bad already, but I didn't know Tone Loc was going to be a guest star on the show itself. All right, fantastic.
I know some famous people.
How are you, buddy? You sound terrible.
So I feel better. I feel much, much better than I sound. Last weekend, we went to SeaWorld with the Cub Scouts.
Right.
And SeaWorld was 5 minutes away, 10 minutes away.
Sure.
From where they were holding Podfest.
Nice.
So I decided to go early with my son and crash Podfest. And I probably spent about 2.5 hours at Podfest. There were over 2,000 podcasters
Wow.
in attendance at Podfest.
Nice.
And so saw a bunch of people that I knew. And then, from there went to SeaWorld. So I don't exactly know. My son had started to develop a little sinus bug. Probably Friday night, Saturday morning, my son started to develop something. I remember seeing a post when I got back from the weekend. Somebody posted on social media, what was your biggest takeaway from Podfest? And one of the guys that I know, one of the guys that I went up to and talked to and said hello to, posted a picture of his positive COVID test. Then we're at SeaWorld where it's a theme park, so you don't know who's there, who's touching.
Yep.
As much as we try to sanitize and wash and do all that, so Lord knows if I got it from my son, if I got it from Podfest. I know it is a COVID negative. I did take.
So you're not a COVID. It's just more
I did
of a
take a
common
COVID
cold.
test, and I've had no other symptoms other than a stuffy nose, some chest congestion, and now I always get laryngitis every time I get sick.
That's too funny.
So,
well, I'm assuming the performance of your hit songs in the past itself have gone well after you've acquired this.
So anybody that wants to know the history of the show, go back and listen to my first 5 episodes. I had the same kind of. This is not my super sexy voice. But the first 5 episodes had this same kind of voice because I had made a commitment to knock them out, and
you did.
I wasn't going to let a little sickness
You're here
stop
doing
me.
it again, so I appreciate that, and we'll try to have you chime in and give some good words of wisdom throughout the show itself. But
there you go.
I'm glad you're here, brother, and I'm glad you're feeling okay.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. So what are we talking about today?
I'm a little nervous and a little worrisome in regards to, but I got to say. There's anxiety and stress when it comes to managing money. And I will probably know that well because, again, I've been 10 days in my home, and I feel like here's another bill. Here's another thing. By the way, we need to now worry about this. Oh, wait, the door's not working. Something, So, again, I'm glad that the house is under warranty, gets a new build so that, first year, everything's under warranty. But not everything is covered, of course, because you have to. So it's like, oh my goodness, how are we going to manage this? Here's another thing we have to buy for the house. So, our budget has been totally revamped. We have to go back and do all those kind of things. But man, it is stressful where it's like someone asks for money and then you have solicitors at the door. Hey, can you give us more money? I'm like, no, I don't want your services. Get away from me.
Have you had the guys walking around yet? We can cut your palm trees for you.
Palm trees, yeah, of course you get that. No, it's palm trees and they're everything's solar. Hey, solar. I'm like, dude, I've been here 4 days. I'm like, I'm good. I don't need the solar yet.
If we wanted solar, we would have had the builder put it on the house.
Exactly. But yes, I can relate to definitely that anxiety. Having an emergency fund, having those kind of things in place makes it a lot easier. But my goodness, there's so much change, so much that's happening, and it's still fresh. I'm still living in boxes. I'm doing all these kind of things itself. So there's a little bit of stress and a little bit of uncertainty that's kind of going and vibing through the house. And of course, my wife is so she's like, don't worry, you're cool, it's all good, relax. But at the same time, it's like, for me, I'm that scarcity mindset. It's like, what if the next ball? What if we do this? What if we can't do? So I gotta be talked off the ledge a little bit there.
So what is money anxiety, and how do we battle it?
I mean, the money anxiety itself, it's kind of that. Think about it like this: it's it's the stress. It's the like, how do we manage the money itself when it comes to the income coming in, things that are going out. But it's that stress of like, what do we do next? What's the stress of the unknown? What causes stress when it comes to anything that you do? A lot of times it's that unknown. It's that I don't understand. I don't know. What are we gonna do? What if something goes wrong? Kind of thing. And it's that self, emotion that drives us to kind of worry, and that worry turns into some stress. We get stress. It turns into, it could be, some people do headaches, and again, it had that physical effect itself on us. But it's really, really for me, I think that anxiety from us when it comes to money is that stemming of the unknown. How do we, what are we doing, and what do we do next when it comes to our finances?
Yeah, that's what I think it is the unknown. And what I found is the best way to challenge the unknown is to think in terms of worst case scenario, which I talk to a lot of my clients about. What's the worst thing that can happen here? Well, the worst thing that can happen in a financial scenario is probably a bankruptcy.
Yeah.
But even that isn't so bad. Or the worst case scenario potentially could be a garnishment of wages, but there's ways to settle those.
To avoid, yeah.
There's ways to avoid those. Worst case scenario, depending on where you live, worst case scenario could be maybe you lose the house. But I've always been of the mindset that the house is where you live, the home is where your family is. So one way that I like to deal with anxiety, just in general, but specifically money anxiety, is to think in terms of what's the worst case scenario.
Yeah. What could the worst thing happen to you? I totally agree. Just trying to understand, putting things into perspective. You're right. Is this the worst thing that could be happening? It feels like it because, of course, it's like, well, what if I can't pay a bill, or what if I can't do something? That kind of unknown still plays into it. But that impact, that kind of stress itself has an impact on us, and it's not just mentally. It can have, it can have an impact on us physically. When some of us, the anxiety that comes out, it can have, chest pains and headaches.
Could make you sound like me right now.
It can make you sick. You're right. So
I'm not anxious about money right now.
Yeah.
I'm just sick.
That would be just sick itself. But I think, for us, it's really to, understand what are the signs leading into that kind of financial anxiety. Like, is finances and your money a stressor? Well, how do you identify those? What are some of the signs that you would go into that? So for me, some of the things that we need to look out for, again, that overwhelming worry about money, right? Like there's always a constant, what if next? What is going to happen next? You get paid, and it's not this, it's not this like, okay, great hard work, I got paid and stuff like. No, it's like, oh my goodness, how am I going to handle all these bills? What am I going to do with this money? There's so much to do. Again, it's that constant worry itself. So identifying those types of signs allow you to kind of like, okay, there's a problem, that we need to work on itself. The other thing that I see when it comes to that stress as well is the avoidance. A lot of people, it's more of just like, dig the head in the sand and hopefully it goes away. And that can have obviously a detrimental impact on relationships, especially if like one spouse is having more stress than the other. So I think having that avoidance doesn't mean that the problem goes away. It just, again, we're just kicking the can down the road. But that's another sign of like, that anxiety. It's kind of like, okay, the worry and also this kind of avoidance could be another symptom or another sign that you need to kind of be worried about.
Yeah, and I think when I do see somebody that wants to file or needs to file bankruptcy, one of the common threads that I see in a lot of those types of clients is the burying your head in the sand until it's too late. But call the banks, talk to the banks.
Yeah.
If you're going to be late on a bill, it's okay to be late every once in a while if you just budget that you're going to have to pay a late charge the next month.
That's it.
But when it's month after month after month after month, then maybe there's a problem you got to look into a little bit more.
Yep.
but talk to the lenders. I'm having trouble this month because, I need a little help this month because, and one late charge isn't going to kill you.
Yeah. No, and I think a lot of times there's some type of shame tied to it. It's like, well, if I have to call the bank for support or help, it's like I'm admitting some type of defeat or admitting some. And I think we have to eliminate some of that thought process when it comes to, it's like, hey, you're right. Open communication. You're right. If it's one late payment, okay, great. It's $35, whatever that fee might be. But having the conversation to kind of figure out, like, what happens if I can't do it again next month, or what do I do next? Knowing your options before it becomes too big of a problem, I think that's the thing. But for me, again, communication just between spouses, communication within the household itself. A lot of times, there are problems in the house with the money itself and paying bills, and no one knows about it because the one person is kind of putting all the burden on themselves to manage that.
Yeah, I see that a lot too, where a husband and wife will come in and the wife doesn't know
Yeah.
how dire the situation is, or the husband doesn't know how dire the situation is.
Yeah, I think so. Those are, for me, the other signs you kind of see that there may be some stress there too. Yeah, mood swings, irritability, that kind of stuff as well, and the impacts to the relationship. Like if a conversation about, hey, let's pay the light bill turns into a huge fight, there may be, again, that's signs that we have, some anxiety that's tied to, the money conversations, the money itself. I would be more concerned, like, we have a huge fight and all we're just trying to do is get coffee. That sometimes leads into that as well. So it's like, okay, there may be a bigger problem here that we need to kind of talk into.
It used to drive me crazy. We'd go out to dinner. My wife would say, I want to order a drink. And I'd say, okay. And she'd go, how much is the drink? I'm like, honey, if you got to ask how much a drink is, we got bigger
Exactly.
issues there.
Exactly. And do that in New York. That'll be a problem. It's your bigger cities, those drinks are a lot more expensive. But I agree. I like the fact that there's a communication, like how much is the drink itself. But again, it didn't lead to an argument in regards to that, especially again in public. We don't want to be like, oh my goodness, why are you buying the bourbon? Blah blah blah. And it's like, there shouldn't be. If we're leading into those kind of conversations, there's a problem. There's some anxiety that we need to address. It's kind of weird, but something to, like, compulsive buying. So burying the head in the sand. And another sign might be just, like, what, it's not the end of the world. I'm just going to keep buying, or I'm going to keep doing something, and not acknowledge that there may be some issues itself. We know there's problems, but I'm going to still continue to buy. I'm still going to rack up debt itself. And then eventually one day this will be something we need to address. So something to also look out to when it comes to, some of that signs of there may be some issues there.
I thought of our no spend challenge the other day. We were in Costco. I went to Costco with my boys. We needed to get groceries. And right at the front there they had, and I want to get one of those Bluetooth speakers, like the big Bluetooth speaker, and they had one that was on sale for like $70.
Sure.
And I had it in the cart, and I was putting other stuff in the cart around it, and I eventually decided no, and I ended up putting it back. We had the money to buy it.
Sure.
It was on sale. It was discounted, but what I kept thinking is, especially right now when us Floridians are cold right now. When am I going to use this thing?
Right.
I don't want to buy it just to buy it.
Right. No, that good conversations internally to kind of like that need versus the wants. So those are, again, good healthy habits to allow you. It's not that you don't have the money itself. It's more like, is this the right time? Is this an impulse purchase, or is this the right time itself that we could say, I bought it, it's on sale. But there's a need, there's a value for what it is that we're buying as well. Because you're right, a lot of people, we just go out and be like, I know I can buy it, or maybe I can't. But there's a justification in regards to, like, do I really need this item? You know what? Doesn't matter. I can afford it, I'm going to buy it. Or I think I can afford it, I'm still going to buy it because it makes me feel good.
That's where people run into problems.
Yep.
I think I can afford it.
Yep.
And so I'm going to buy it when they really can't.
And so, guys, again, these are the signs that we need to just keep in mind when it comes to, when it comes to this financial anxiety, and like, what are we looking for from there? Obviously, feeling shame, feeling embarrassment when it comes to ties those things. And of course, I think the most common one too is sleep. Like I can't sleep because I'm always worried about how am I going to pay the bills, or am I going to make enough money, or tax season. Some tax season for some people are like, oh wow, I'm getting money back, and I'm like, but for some people it's like, oh my goodness, how much am I going to pay? Is this going to be? So that can be a form of, again, signs to kind of go, oof. I'm not sleeping well. It's like, well, why is that the case? Well, all I keep thinking about is money. All I can think about is bills.
Years and years ago, when I was going through some education about how do you define your ideal client, one of the things I kept saying is my ideal client, when it's a woman, is a woman who wears a lot of eye makeup. And people would look at me funny and be like, well, what does eye makeup have to do with any of this?
Sure.
She's sleep deprived. And she's wearing eye makeup to cover up that she's got bags under her eyes.
Damn.
That's kind of hard to make that connection. Maybe she's wearing a lot of makeup because she likes to wear a lot of makeup. Who knows? But that was one of the things I used to say back in the day is find me somebody that wears a lot of eye makeup.
Nice. No, and to be honest with you, you're right. You could do that with guys as well, right? Usually find a business owner who's got bagged under his eyes. It's either they're working too many hours or they got stress, because they can't sleep. So
or both.
Or both.
They're working so many hours to try to generate more money.
Exactly. So I think, it's okay if you're seeing that these may be signs that you're going through and understanding those kind of things. But then the question is going to be, what do we do? What do we do? How do we manage this going forward? And I think that's the next step. For me, again, working with clients as a financial coach, it's, trying to kind of, okay, we acknowledge, let's get the head out of the sand, first of all. That's going to be the big thing. But let's acknowledge where we are. Like, what is the source of the anxiety right now? Is it I don't make enough money? Is it I have too many bills? Is it what it is? So let's identify that as part of the process. So again, that's budgets, that's tracking your spending, but that's also like, what are the goals? I could be stressed about money because I'm going to retire, or I'd like to retire in the next few months or the next few years. My goodness, what if you think you don't have enough money to do that? That could be a huge source of anxiety. And there's a lot of people today with the way inflation is, the way things are today in our economy. People are feeling like, do I have to work till 70, 80 years old in order to, continue to live the way I do, or try to make ends meet?
Well, making a budget will help you with that.
At least to understand, correct.
To figure out where your money's going and how much can you save and what can you do every month. One of the other things that I like to do is just sometimes acknowledge that it's okay. I didn't buy that speaker at Costco, but if I had, and I had the money to do it,
It's
that's
okay.
fine.
Spend it with no shame, right?
Especially if it's on sale. Don't beat myself up over something that I bought because I could afford to buy it and I had the money to buy it.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Whether you're using credit card or you're using cash, there should be no shame in the purchase. If there's shame tied to the purchase, or there's this buyer's remorse later down the road, let's understand. Again, there's a source. What's the source of that anxiety? For me, is like, again, credit card or cash. I don't care how you do it, as long as it's paid off. The credit card's paid off at the end of the month, or as long as we have the money within the budget itself to manage that too.
If you use cash, it's free.
We're not going there. Oh, man. Okay, tone low. Calm down there, buddy. All right, so the other thing you had mentioned, create a budget. Obviously, we need to know where the money is going. Control of the money itself changes your perception. It does change the way, stress is as well. A lot of folks, the stress is just more of like, what's the common term? Like, damn, I got paid. Where'd all the money go?
Right.
So if you're hearing that and you're saying those kind of things, having a plan that allows you to gain control, I think for me, it's I'm happening to my money. I make money itself. I'm telling my money what to do. And what are the important things for me? Saving, right? Emergency fund. And then you pay the bills. Then you pay all, the mortgage, the light, the things that the kids need. And then, of course, for me, debt is last. Again, our thought process, most people who are stressed in this with this life itself, it's more like debt's first. How do I pay the debts? And they don't realize, like, the savings, the mortgage, the light, the car, all those kind of, it's no. How do I make the car payment? How do I make, again, we're looking at it differently. So again, changing that perception of how we do money, I think will make a big difference on that as well. What we focus on, control the controllables in this situation. I think a lot of us, we still try to like, how do I manage this, the big bank, this, that, the kind of the bills. I'm like, guys, when we're this stressed and we're trying to change the way we do things, do the small things, small steps, small changes, control what you can control, right? Like, do you have to go to get the Starbucks coffee every day? That you can control. I can change the way I do things so that I can save some money or do something else with that money itself. I think a lot of us shoot for, how do I make the $1 million investment, right? So that I can, and that's, let me tell you, go to TikTok. Sean, we're going to have a lot of more episodes 2024 because there's a lot of advice on TikTok in regards to that. But jumping into like, how do I make $1 million a month? And it's like, okay, great. But like small steps to get to that point. I think people want to jump and do these large leaps into how do I address the issue itself. For me, I think it's take the small things, focus on what you can control, and then have those things help you along in regards to small to bigger things in your budget.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people I've had sit in my office and say, when this next deal hits,
right,
I'll have enough money to pay blank.
Yep.
And then it's when the deal doesn't hit that they get into even more trouble.
Exactly. And I think it's okay to to kind of plan ahead, but I think most of us get into this trouble itself is we spend ahead. We spend the money that is supposedly coming, and I think you're right. You probably see a lot more times where it's the money doesn't come, and yet we've spent it already. We've done all the money, we've done all the spending necessary, and yet oops, that deal didn't fall through, or we're still waiting for that. That just compounds the issue, and of course, that doesn't help with our stress around our finances as well. I think we talked about it last year as well, but educating ourselves.
Yeah.
Understanding when we talk about budgeting and we talk about how do we invest, the importance of emergency funds and all of these kind of things itself. Educate yourself in what you're investing in, what you're using your money. I think a lot of times too, it's kind of like, oh, I do this, but I don't understand why I do it with our money, especially on the investing side. A lot of times it's just, oh yeah, it's somewhere there, but I have no clue what's happening. And it's like educating ourselves allows us to be able to gain more control. I always feel better when I understand something than it is to go in and say, hey, I'm going to go and practice law, right? I'm going to, there's going to be a tremendous amount of stress to say, hey, let me see if I can talk like Sean about bankruptcy itself. There's a tremendous amount of stress because I just don't understand and I don't know. But for you, Sean, obviously you the man, you understand those things, so it's not as stressful when it comes to that kind of thing.
Right now, all you got to do is get laryngitis to talk like me.
I love it. But so for me, I think educating yourself helps you with that anxiety, that stress itself. It's the unknown that gets us into trouble. Fill in those gaps. Let's understand those kind of things so that there's less unknown when it comes to your money. Obviously we seek help. For me, I think that's a good tip itself is talk to the creditors, talk to the bank, talk to people like Sean in regards to where you are in your or talk to your financial coach. Having the conversation between, obviously I want conversation to happen within the spouses, but if there's stress, there's no one wants to talk to each other, having an outside source to have a conversation where there's no judgment. You're right. You just talk, get your ideas out, see what the situation, and we understand where you're coming from. So it's really more of like, let's have a conversation so that you can feel better. Because a lot of times it's just having it, we've been so long avoiding, and just having the conversation, an open and honest conversation, not only wakes you up a little bit, it educates you in regards to where you are from a situation, but it also makes you feel better to get it off. Because again, it's that albatross that's sitting on your shoulder. You want to, try to alleviate that so it doesn't feel so heavy.
Well, and I think one of the other issues that I see in my practice is people that think that they're unique, that they can't pay back their bills. I've got filing cabinets full of people that can't pay their bills.
Yep.
There's nothing unique about. I mean, the circumstances may be unique,
different,
or why I couldn't pay my bills may be a reason that differs from somebody else. But not being able to keep up with your bills or not knowing where your money goes at the end of the month or being stressed financially.
It's common, more
Yeah,
common than you think.
You're not alone in that.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of us, we still feel, because it's hard to kind of, like, you don't just go up to your neighbor and be like, oh, dude, I'm having trouble paying the mortgage this month. Ain't that fun? How are those Jets doing? So I think
You know what, though? I bet you if you did that, your neighbor might say, oh, yeah, man, I went through that
Totally
2 years
understand.
ago. I totally get it.
Yeah, and that's the fear of people judging you, the fear of people making fun of you. There's this, there's all this fear that goes onto it. But you'll be surprised, again, finding groups that have it, have common goals in regards to that. There's Facebook groups, there's places to do those kind of things. Find those things itself so that you can kind of have that conversation, so you don't feel like you're alone, because you're not. You're right. This is more common than you think out there.
Yeah.
For me, staying flexible, again, as we think like, oh, I'll create the budget and we're good, right? It's like, and then you realize, no, life happens every month. So staying flexible around managing your money allows you to be able to make adjustments when life throws stuff at you. And that's, I think you need to be from that perspective. But my last advice for a lot of my clients is focus on the progress. Don't try to be perfect. Like, you're not going to create the perfect budget the first time. Your process is not going to be perfect in the beginning. Focus on, the small changes. Focus on what how you're progressing. Like, oh, I saved some money this month. I paid off some debt sometime. You're not gonna address all of these things all at once. So I think having that mindset of like, okay, this is a journey. It's gonna take some time. Will make a big difference in regards to how you handle that financial stress as well.
Yeah, and it's also kind of the concept of, if I gain or lose a lot of weight, I'm not
Same
gonna
thing.
I'm not gonna see it as it happens. But if I look at a picture of myself from 2, 3, 4 years ago, and I look at a picture of myself today, and I go, wow, look at all the weight that I've lost.
Right.
Look at how much more fit I've become.
You feel better. You see
It's the same thing from a money perspective. You may not pay off that entire credit card bill this month or this year, but when you look 2 years ago and it was $25,000,
Exactly.
and now you look at it this year and it's $9,000,
Right.
Look at all the progress you've made.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Is we're thinking like, oh, if it takes me a year to make progress on such a big debt itself, I'm like, yeah, but make progress. It's small increments. If you have big windfalls, you have a bigger shovel to throw at some of this debt. That's a great thing. So, but I think all of us kind of like, well, if I'm not making huge strides towards alleviating some of the stress that ties with money, again, if that's debt or saving for an amount, for the down payment on a home, things like that, we're still in this instant gratification. I need this now. We got to get the different mindset where it's like, what can we do each day? What can we do each month to get us closer to that goal that we have specific to our money?
Yeah.
It's craziness, but hey, I would say, we understand the stress, but there's a few things that you can try to employ, as part of your process today. But again, are you ready to do that? And I think a lot of people still focus on like, well, I'm not ready. And I'm like, dude, you'll never be ready if you think that way itself. Take the small baby steps. Do something small today to get you started on your journey.
How do you eat an elephant?
Yeah, one bite at a time. Let's go.
So, well, cool. Thank you. Thank you for shouldering most of this week's episode.
I appreciate the opportunity. I'm feeling comfortable, bro. We've been doing this for some time, and I'm hoping that we give some value, with the topic as well.
I'll make a podcaster out of you yet.
Just
don't leave me and go solo.
No. Oh, please, are you kidding me? This is I am the Robin to the Batman, my friend.
So we still got some of our own bills to pay. So we want to say thank you to Sam Cohen at Attorneys First Insurance. He writes errors and omissions coverage for attorneys and title companies all over the country. So if you are an attorney or you own a title company and you want to check out apples to apples what Sam can do for you, contact him, Sam at Attorneys First. If you want to help me pay for my next round of Robitussin, you can go to the Crushing Debt or the Patreon / Crushing Debt page. So patreon.com / Crushing Debt. And the other thing that I'll be promoting until we get into April or May is the PanCan Purple Stride Walk
Yes.
to raise money for pancreatic cancer. You can go to pancan.org, PANCAN.org, and search for the team My Legacy Striders. That's my team, my wife's team, and you can make a donation there. Other than that, I'm going to go rest my voice now. I'm going
I
to go
think
drink
so.
some hot tea and rest my voice now.
I heard bourbon's pretty good for that too. but,
Bourbon may work, yeah. So that'll do it for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. Hopefully you have more money at the end of the month rather than month at the end of the money, and my voice should be back for next week's episode. We'll talk to you then.